Good morning, Jarl. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Good morning.
Let me introduce you to our viewers today. This is Jarl Severn, CEO of Owen Mumford Group and Managing Director of the Oxford Owen Mumford. Owen Mumford is manufacturer of medical devices, for those of you who don't know. It's based in Woodstock, Oxfordshire, and it has 840 employees, was founded in 1952. Now, Jarl is here for my small series of B4 interviews on the challenges of leadership during the pandemic. And I'm going to make this a short video so that you can watch it easily and right to the end, because Jarl has got some very interesting things to say. And I'm going to ask you my first question, Jarl, and which is, what changes have you noticed in your leadership and what challenges during this pandemic situation?
Well, we're now a good, 9 months into the pandemic, which has given us plenty of time to reflect and reshape how we're managing during this extraordinary period. But certainly from day one, the most important thing that we had to address was communication. Communication across the group, as all our subsidiaries around the world were affected directly or indirectly, and in particular here in the UK, where the bulk of our employees are. So communication became an essential tool, and more than ever, every word that we said as management was really listened to and looked forward to, because people really needed guidance and understanding of how to address and work in this new circumstances. So concise, clear communication in a timely way that gave people the confidence that whenever announcements were made by the government, we were taking those announcements and acting on them and issuing new guidelines, policies, and procedures within the company. So people knew exactly where they stood every day. So that sort of has happened every 2 or 3 weeks. Ever since then, we've been issuing communication, bringing everybody up to speed and reinforcing what rules were imposed, which were perhaps not there in the first place. So I'll say communication is one of the key cornerstones of management, which has really come to the forefront. I think the second one is the actual segmentation of our workforce throughout the world into what we have called A, B, and Cs. The Cs were the workers who could work away from the office and didn't have any requirement to come into any of our sites, such as our sales reps. Sales reps can work from home and go and visit customers. And really, we encouraged them not to come into the office. They were Group Cs. Group B would temporarily need to come into the office, such as our engineers. Our engineers can work quite comfortably from home, but every now and again, they would have to come in to use the 3D printers for prototyping or access specialist software equipment that only is available on site. Yeah. So Bs had temporary in and out tickets, as it were. And then the Group A, probably the most important group for us during this period. Those are the ones who had no other option but to come to work to be able to complete their jobs. Those are the production operatives, our quality staff, and the engineers and mechanics who keep everything flowing within our factories here in Oxfordshire. So those.
Ask about you. Did you, just to make this a little bit interactive, were you an A or a B or a C?
I was a B, and I was a B because I could call myself a C, because in theory, all of my work could be done from home. But we made a decision that there'll be at least one director on site at any one time. And I take it in turns with at least one of my directors to circulate, as it were, between the sites and being on site at any one time. So today I'm at home, but my finance director is in the office. Yeah. So in the worst case scenario that there's a guidance is needed or responsibility or authority is required on site, then there's at least one director present.
Yeah.
The others are working from home.
So you told me before that you had 4 different new ways of working. So you've covered 2 of them, the segmentation and the communication. There are a couple more, aren't there?
Yes. So I think one of the other things that we've learned and experienced in a new way is communication in groups. So one way is the communication of me to the rest of the organization, my very first point as management. But the way we work now, especially for the group Bs and Cs, using Team like we're doing today, or Zoom calls, or FaceTime, these kind of tools were really, there were a geek's paradise before, and the rest of us just looked down in amazement. How did they do it? Now we've become pretty old in tuning in and hooking up to meetings with 1, 2, and sometimes 10, 20 people in a virtual meeting room, and that's become the new norm. That is a skill and a experience that we've all settled into quite well, and will be with us, I think, going forward in a much bigger capacity than we could ever imagine. The downside of that is that managing these meetings has to be very disciplined. So you could say it's good because you get your objectives settled very quickly, the agenda is crisp, the output is clear, but you do become quite exhausted. Immediately before this meeting, I had another team meeting. Immediately after this meeting, I'm on another Zoom meeting. And you do end up booking yourself in the diary in a way that actually is unhealthy to a certain degree. That does bring on an unintended consequence, and that is stress in a way that we hadn't anticipated. Yeah. So actually managing our staff off-site is something that is a new phenomenon that we have to address. Yeah. And I guess that kind of leads on to the final one, if I may, and that is the skill set required to manage people off-site is very different from managing people on-site. So managing behaviors, which is what we do as managers in the office day to day, we're now managing almost exclusively on output. And that puts a lot of pressure on the manager to define expectations, and on the employee on actually performing and feeling that they're performing and hearing that they're performing to a satisfactory level. So a different skill set, and in some cases, it's been jolly difficult to keep people motivated, even working from home, which many people would dream of doing. But in fact, when real life catches up, working from home can be pretty stressful and quite demanding in its own way.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you've obviously got things well organized over there, and doing things differently, but a couple of things came up to my mind from what you said. One is about the meetings. What have you discovered about interaction in meetings? Because personally, I've discovered that even with a small group of only 6 people, the ability to cut in or to have something creative where you're brainstorming is very much restricted on a Zoom call. What have your people found, and what have you found?
I think that element, you're absolutely right. That is a restricting factor. So as a company, our meeting culture is quite polite. We listen, we allow everybody to speak, and in a Zoom environment or Teams environment, that is obligatory for the whole thing to work. You have to sort of put your hand up electronically rather than cut across. So I think it become a staccato type of meeting. Jimmy speaks first, then James speaks, then Sarah speaks, then Jane speaks, as opposed to this interaction, as you say, when 2 or 3 people cut across each other, which sometimes can be counterproductive, but very often can also encourage or develop a catalyst that you wouldn't otherwise have had in the discussion and the subject.
Absolutely. And I was just on one meeting yesterday when it wasn't a matter of interrupting, but it came across as an interruption because the technology can't quite manage a short pause and somebody else coming in. It just seems to always overlap you.
That's right. That's right.
Now, one other thing I wanted to ask you was the drawbacks. Any drawbacks you've seen from this new skill set for the managers? What would you say are the pros and cons of that?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, managing on output rather than behavior is a different skill set. But most importantly, managing people for the sake of people is one of the big challenges we have. Out of sight, out of mind is all too easy to become a reality. And some people do need more support than others. And to that extent, we certainly created a lot of awareness around our mental health support that we are able to offer as an employer, both independently with our own mental health first aiders that we have in-house, who can offer a listening ear, but also by sponsoring and being involved with third-party mental health organizations that we then create awareness about throughout the company. And and to people working at home as well as on site. I spend a lot of time talking about people struggling at home, but of course, people have also struggled on site. People have been genuinely scared about coming to work during the pandemic. There were periods at the beginning where people really felt they're putting their lives at risk at coming into the office or into the production hall. And you have to recognize that and manage that. And at the same time, we are key workers. We are making medical devices. We were supplying the new Nightingale hospitals and various other institutions with desperately needed medical devices. So we have a role to play, and we have to live up to that. And everybody has to understand their obligation in it. But we must also understand the pressure we're putting on them to meet those obligations and try and manage that and balance it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm quite tempted to ask you about problems with supply of PPE, but I'm not going to go down that route. I have my special question about the transparency and certainty continuum, which is a rather unique continuum that I've invented. But if we think the continuum with transparency at one end and certainty at the other, where would you say your leadership style sits?
It is an unusual continuum, and I think, as I've said to you before, I'm Danish. I have a Danish background and a natural sort of Scandinavian mindset. So transparency and whole egalitarian style of management, I think, is a core competence of mine. But generally speaking, I'll probably put myself in the middle, and you'll probably get a lot of people saying that. If slightly more towards transparency. Sorry?
But for different reasons. Most people don't have a Scandinavian background, for instance.
But that's certainly the egalitarian and transparent way of managing is very, very important part of what I am and what I do. But the certainty that people expect from you is also very important. A lot of people say they like the independence of being empowered to make all their own decisions, but most people actually want very clear direction, especially during this period, but generally also. So you have this mixed group of people, actually sometimes it's the same people, who both want empowerment and to do their own thing, but they want direction at the same time, creating a dichotomy for us as managers. So I do to think I manage a bit like a shepherd. I'm behind the crowd, but giving them direction as to where they're going. And they're running ahead of me in the direction I expect them to. And generally that works. I think at times we can all as managers provide more certainty, because although we say things in what we believe is a clear way, not everybody interprets it as such. And you use words that can be open to ambiguity. And as managers, we're always guilty of that. So I put myself in the middle, I would say.
Yes. I think one of the things about transparency is the ability to say, I don't know, or I've done that wrong, or something like that. What's your feeling about that?
I think it's important to be able to do that, but it's also important that you don't make that a commonality so that people actually lose confidence in your decision-making process. So you have sometimes to go with your conviction, and there may be consequences of that you had, which are unintended, and sometimes you have to live with that. And on the other times, when you have made a humongous blunder, of course you put your hand up and you say, that was wrong, let's do it again. I did it on a big scale a few years ago when I decided to build a factory in Whitney, and I put my hand up just before we were about to dig the hole and said, stop, this is not the right time for us to be building a factory. We have so many exciting innovations that we need to invest in. I actually pulled the card and said, we are dropping the building, but we are investing in R&D instead. Now we're building the factory in Whitney, subject to planning approval, but it's 5 years after the original plan. So it happens to all of us, trust me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this has been very interesting. Thank you so much, Jarl. And I hope you can manage to have 5 minutes before your next Zoom meeting.
That would be good.
So that it will go as well as this one has. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Alison.
Goodbye.